Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a sit-down with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal. From doctors and nurses to counselors and janitors, how will VA staffing cuts affect the future of veterans' care? We get answers from the ranking member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. And Blumenthal digs into a continued lack of information sharing transpiring at the VA. We've got that and more on tap in our conversation. Coming to you from Washington, D.C., it's the latest in news and analysis, from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly.
Here today with Senator Rich Blumenthal, who's on both the Armed Services Committee and the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you for sitting down with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Wanted to chat about some specifics on those committees, but more in general, I wanted to talk about where things stand with communication with this administration. In both of your roles overseeing the military and overseeing Veterans Affairs issues, you've had a lot of concerns that you're just not getting the information. As we hear some of these contract cuts and staffing cuts and things of that sort, you're just not hearing it. So I'm wondering if you can just start by telling me, where do things stand with information from the DoD on potential civilian cuts, civilian worker cuts, and where do things stand with VA in terms of those same contract and bigger reforms?
You know, I've been on these committees for a while. I've been in the United States Senate for almost 15 years. And throughout most of my career, in fact, all except for the last 6 months, those committees have been by and large bipartisan. And requests for information were answered maybe not as promptly we would like, but the departments have been responsive, whether it's the Department of Defense or the VA, because they know our responsibility is to do oversight and accountability. And information is what the public deserves. If it's not classified, we need and deserve to know it. And I've been deeply disappointed at the lack of responsiveness. In fact, stonewalling and stalling, and often just refusing to answer at all requests for basic information. With the VA, it's information like canceling contracts, the numbers of contracts, who they're with, what the consequences are. Literally hundreds of contracts that the VA secretary has said he is canceling, more than 600. And likewise with cuts in workforce, 83,000 people, that's his plan or goal. Who is going to be cut? What are their responsibilities? Are they going to be replaced at all? And what are going to be the consequences to veterans' health care? So those kinds of questions are just an example of how we need and deserve information. Obviously, we have to look at the use of signal for classified information. We have to look at the consequences of cuts in the DoD as well, tens of thousands of people there, civilians, the purging of the top level military leaders, apparently for political reasons, and other kinds of aspects of policy in both the Department of Defense and the VA.
So let's jump back to that DoD side, because I'll get to the VA side. Some of those decisions aren't made yet, and that's been some of the excuse that I know the administration's given, is they just don't know. But in terms of things like the firing of the top uniformed officials in the Navy and the Coast Guard and the Joint Chiefs Chairman, those are things that already happened. They're finished at this point. Have you gotten any real communication as to the reason behind them or the impact of those? Are you still pushing to get something?
We've received no real information, and we are still pushing. Okay. And I'm hopeful that both sides of the aisle will be pushing, because again, the demand for information should be bipartisan. I've said that too much information is classified. You know, the public could know a lot of what we discuss in the SCIF behind closed doors in a classified setting. If anything, we should be making known more information to the public, but most of what we're asking is totally unclassified, and there's simply been a lack of response.
You recently had the VA secretary up before the Veterans Affairs Committee, and it was a fairly tense hearing, hitting on a lot of these issues, on a lot of this lack of communication. Has anything improved since then? Do you feel like there was any sort of breakthrough, or are we just in the same rut in terms of they'll provide information when they feel like it?
I would say, really, we're in the status quo, which is unacceptable. We need to move forward on the nominees, and we should. I've said that they should provide this basic information before we move forward with confirmation. Still, they could put those nominees on the floor anytime they want, and there would be a vote. So nothing is really blocking the administration from moving forward with these nominees. But my feeling is that they should be held accountable for this information. Remember, they've been in office now for a significant period of time. They've talked about a plan. Yes, it is action in the future, but we want to know what the strategy is. 83,000 people, that's a highly significant number, and it affects VA healthcare, as well as payment and benefits under the PAC Act, the Elizabeth Dole Act. You can't implement the law without the implementers. You cannot, in effect, execute the responsibilities under the PAC Act or the Elizabeth Dole Act or provide health care unless you have people with the skills and the knowledge and the dedication in place. The VA has already lost probably tens of thousands of workers through both voluntary resignations and firings. Some of the people they fired, they hired back. Why did they fire them in the first place? They have 40,000 vacancies right now for doctors, nurses, counselors, janitors. To say that we're only firing frontline workers, as the VA secretary did when he came before us, a surgical team needs the schedulers, the nurses, the anesthesiologists, the janitors. It can't be just the surgeon walking into the operating suite.
So if they were to give you a more detailed plan or some sort of guideline, because that's been what the Secretary said. Secretary said, hey, we're still developing this plan, we're going to get there, but we're not going to hit frontline workers. We're going to make sure this doesn't hurt medical care, this doesn't hurt the benefit side. If they were to come to you and give you a plan that said, here's what we're thinking, here's the kinds of positions we're thinking about, here's the impact, would that calm some of the concerns? Is there a potential path forward there where you could say, all right, like, I can see where the bureaucracy has gotten big in these areas now that you've looked at it, but they just haven't done that yet?
They are nowhere near doing it. They've refused to do it. They've continued to slow walk us, stonewall us, stall. I think we have a basic responsibility to insist on information that we need to do oversight on the positions, not just the ones up for confirmation, but the VA facilities in West Haven, Connecticut, where we're rebuilding, physically constructing a new facility. Will it continue? What will happen to those contracts? What happens to the research that's ongoing at Harvard into veteran suicide? Apparently they've terminated, but no one is able to confirm it for me as recently as the past few days when the VA came to testify, not the secretary, but Dr. O'Toole. No explanation, no confirmation. So these are kind of basic information that both sides of the aisle deserve to receive. And I will tell you something. Nobody on the Republican side is saying to me, we shouldn't have that information. Nobody on the Republican side is saying, we're okay with this lack of responsiveness. They may not be joining us on the floor of the Senate demanding it, but no one is saying that this kind of stonewalling is okay.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because we have heard from Chairman Moran and from Chairman Wicker about some concerns with a couple of these issues The Signal investigation, as you referenced earlier, is one that Chairman Wicker and the Armed Services have asked for more information on. Chairman Moran said that he wants a more detailed. Are you communicating with them? Do you think that you can get them to not just quietly agree with you in the background, but to start to make more of a public stink to get this information out there?
I think they'll be more public as this kind of refusal to provide relevant information continues. Obviously, Secretary Hegseth has been not much more forthcoming than Secretary Collins, and it violates the essential roles that we have as a legislature, so I would expect they'll be more demanding as well.
When we come back, Blumenthal sheds light on the Democrats' plan to combat continued civilian cuts at the VA. Don't go away.
Secretary Collins was somewhat combative in his appearance before, but he's, I think at least publicly, he's tried to portray himself a little bit more apolitical, bipartisan with the veteran stuff. Secretary Hegseth has not had the same approach. Secretary Hegseth has had a very combative approach. He has not been before the committee yet. What are your expectations when he does come and testify? Do you think that there's going to be some level of communication, or do you feel like this is a fight even before you start having that public showdown?
He has a responsibility. He took an oath of office to respect the Constitution. And our responsibility as senators is to exercise oversight. So I would hope he would follow the obligations he has under the law and the moral and even political obligations that he has to be responsive and forthcoming. If he's simply combative, I think he'll alienate both sides, Republican as well as Democrat. I've been in those committees under Democratic administration. We were pretty demanding of them, and sometimes critical, which is also a responsibility. Whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration, we have issues of policy. Are there, for example, enough being done to provide security for communications? Do we have the right kind of technology for the communications with top-level government officials? It goes beyond just, was there a really bad judgment in the use of Signal? Should there be different technology used for those kinds of communications? Apparently, better technology is available, and we ought to be investing in it. That's not a partisan consideration, nor is whether we have enough ships in the fleet, whether we have enough submarines, whether we're moving fast enough to recover some of the delays in construction of submarines. The Secretary of the Department of Defense would be right in saying that these problems are not of his making, but to refuse to talk about them, they will be of his making.
One other issue in there, and we spoke about the civilian workers on the Veterans Affairs side and the potential impact. What's the concern with the potential cuts to the civilian workforce on DoD? Have you gotten a chance to look at, I mean, they haven't given too many specifics yet, but as we've heard from some of the service secretaries and some of the service officials, as certain personnel leave, what's going to be the impact on their operations?
As you say, they haven't given too many specifics. That's what we're going to be demanding. You know, the dearth of information reflects perhaps a lack of strategy. In other words, what are they hiding? Why are they concealing all these specifics? That applies to both departments. If they are moving quickly enough and effectively, why are they not more forthcoming?
What can you do? I mean, you're in the minority now. You've been in the minority and the majority. You know how this dance goes. If they are being obstinate, if you're not getting that information, if you're not getting that oversight, what is it that the Democrats can do to force these issues, to get more public outrage, to move the needle on any of this?
We can raise these issues publicly, which is exactly what we're doing, I think pretty vocally and vehemently. We can offer amendments in committee, and the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, will begin within weeks from now, an opportunity to muster bipartisan support. We can go to the floor and offer unanimous consent resolutions and bills, as we have done, and we can break through to the public and make them understand that our veterans and our men and women in uniform are being shortchanged. And they will be shortchanged because these issues ultimately are matters of national security. If you fire 83,000 people from the VA, a third of them, roughly, are going to be veterans. They're out on the streets, and they all perform significant work for the VA. Maybe not every single one of them, but again, you can't implement laws, whether it's the Dole Act or the PAC Act, with 40,000 positions vacant, many from medical personnel or other key positions. How can you recruit to fill positions if you're firing people who are serving in those same kind of positions? I think this kind of policy is cruel and dumb. It's cruel to the people who are being fired just because they're probationary. Now remember, probationary employees are the young people who are just beginning careers. They're our future, and a lot of them are officials who have been promoted. Why were they promoted? Because they were doing a good job in the position they had before. So we're firing some of our most able and promising people solely because that's what Elon Musk wants to do, because his algorithms dictate it. So I've proposed the Putting Veterans First Act, which would restore those veterans to their positions throughout the federal government and all of the VA employees. But it would also require personal, individual evaluation before anybody's fired. You can't fire them just because they're probationary or just because they are a janitor, which again is dumb, but it's also unfair. We give them rights of appeal, and it would require that information be safeguarded when it's private and confidential. Elon Musk is collecting and harvesting that information, potentially to use it for his own benefit. He has contracts with those agencies, with I think it's 11 or 12 different agencies. At the same time, he's delving into their personal files. He's getting information that can be used to benefit his contract bids. And he is also getting information on individuals, whether it's in the VA or in the DoD. So I think there is a lot here that needs to be exposed and investigated.
When we return, our financial expert is back with her latest tips. Stay tuned. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union is back with her latest advice for financial wellness.
To protect your credit from fraud, you've got two solid options: a credit freeze or a credit lock. They may sound similar, but they differ in important ways. A credit freeze is usually free and offers strong legal protection, while a credit lock may come with a fee but can conveniently be turned on and off through an app. The important thing that they both do is prevent new, unauthorized credit accounts from being opened in your name, and neither choice affects your credit score. If you apply for credit often, a credit lock is handy. If not, go for a credit freeze for better legal safety. Just keep in mind, you'll need to unlock or unfreeze your credit with each bureau before applying for new credit. And whether you go with a lock or a freeze, now you know you're adding a strong layer of defense against identity theft.
To get more coverage of military and defense topics, snag that rebreather and dive into militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most news-savvy vet at this year's reunion, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning bringing you the most recent headlines. And if social media is how you stay up to date, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And for you younger troops, we're on TikTok, so go follow us there as well. After the break, the conclusion of our conversation with Senator Richard Blumenthal. Don't miss it.
One last question for you here, and that's on that area of of cooperation or compromise. I know when Secretary Collins was up on the Hill, there was a lot of conflict with him accusing the Democrats of pushing for status quo rather than pushing for reform. And I just wondered if you could address that issue of, are you, at least what I've heard from your comments, you're not against reform, but you're against like total devastation of VA here. There are areas of gray in between.
That's a really important question, because I've said repeatedly, we need to eliminate waste. There's no question that there's waste in the VA. There's waste in the Pentagon. We need to reduce it wherever we can. It takes careful, thoughtful analysis of specific areas of activity. Can we order scalpels at a lower price? Can we purchase medical equipment or do construction at lower cost? Are there areas where we have too many people? But to say we are cutting 83,000 people and we don't know where, or we won't tell you where, that's the wrong approach. That is using the chainsaw. That's the Elon Musk approach, which is applying an algorithm rather than personal, individual, thoughtful, calibrated, and well-calculated cuts. The commander of the VFW came before our committee and he said, you know, when I was wounded, shrapnel in my arm, surgeon took a scalpel. He didn't use a chainsaw. And that's the approach that we should be using in all of government, the DOD as well as the VA. So cooperation, compromise, absolutely, on legislation, and also on eliminating waste. Reform is necessary. I am encouraging the kind of disruptive approach. We need people ready to innovate and break the old molds and think anew. That's what a new administration does. But if you're going to remodel your house, let's say your living room, you want a new bathroom or kitchen, you don't burn down the house and then rebuild the whole house. You can approach each room individually and more cost effectively than just burning down the house. So I think it's a matter of how to approach it, not whether to do it.
All right, great. Senator, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.